Chapter 1. The Call and the Mirror Chosen One. If you have found your way to these words, it is not by accident. The collective unconscious does not make mistakes. You are here because somewhere deep in the labyrinth of your psyche, in that sacred chamber where the self resides, what Jung called the imago Dei, the God image within, a voice has been calling you. Not the voice of your mother. Not the voice of your culture, not even the voice of your conscious ego. This is the voice that speaks in dreams you cannot forget, in synchronicities you cannot explain, in a restlessness you cannot silence with distractions. You know this voice. You have always known it. It is the voice that made you feel different as a child, the voice that prevented you from fitting into boxes others accepted without question, the voice that whispered to you in the middle of ordinary moments, "There is more. You are more. This world is not what it appears to be." And now, in this moment of your life, that voice has become louder, more insistent, more demanding. It is no longer suggesting, it is commanding. And the command is clear, unmistakable, and for many of you, uncomfortable. Shut your mouth and listen to me. This is not a casual instruction. This is not spiritual etiquette. This is a psychological imperative from the deepest stratum of your being. The self, that totality of conscious and unconscious, the center and circumference of the personality, is issuing a directive that will either make or break the next phase of your individuation. Because you see, chosen one, you are not walking an ordinary path. You never have been. You are walking what I called the journey of individuation, the psychological and spiritual process by which a person becomes who they truly are, distinct from the collective, liberated from the persona, integrated with the shadow, and ultimately united with the self. But here is what most people do not understand about this journey. It is not linear, it is not comfortable, and it is certainly not designed for public consumption. The individuation process moves through you in waves, in seasons, in what the alchemists called stages of transformation. And right now, many of you are in a stage that requires something the modern world despises: silence. Sacred, intentional, protective silence. Not the silence of fear, not the silence of shame, but the silence of the self that knows something your ego does not yet comprehend. You have been talking too much, explaining too much, defending too much, sharing too much, and every word you spoke that was not aligned with the transcendent function, that reconciling symbol between conscious and unconscious, has cost you psychic energy. Energy you needed for the inner work. Energy the self was trying to conserve for the alchemical process happening beneath your awareness. This is why I mapped out the 3 keys to a prosperous life. A practical trilogy that guides chosen ones like you through these exact thresholds without the guilt, without the confusion, without the detours that drain your power. The blueprint I left in that work addresses precisely what happens when the ego speaks before the self has finished its sacred labor. You will find the link in the pinned comment below, and I mention it now not as an interruption but as a compass, because what I am about to reveal to you requires context, requires grounding, requires a map that honors both the mystical and the practical dimensions of your awakening. Now let us return to the depths. Why does the self command silence now? Because you are being prepared for something your conscious mind cannot yet hold. The psyche does not reveal its fullness all at once. It would overwhelm the ego structure. It would fracture your sense of identity. It would trigger what I called psychic inflation, where the ego mistakes itself for the self and collapses under archetypal weight. So instead, the unconscious works in a spiral, revealing layers, then withdrawing, allowing integration, then revealing more. And in this current spiral, you are in what the alchemists termed the nigredo, the blackening, the death phase, the fertile darkness where the old self dissolves so the true self can emerge. But here is the paradox. This dissolution requires your participation through non-participation. You cannot force it. You cannot narrate it to others as it is happening. You cannot explain your way through it. The ego wants to understand, to control, to make sense of the chaos. But the self says, let go, be still, shut your mouth, and trust the process that is older than your name, older than your lineage, older than your culture. Some of you are afraid. You think silence means you are losing your voice, your power, your relevance. But this is the wounded ego speaking, the shadow that was taught to equate visibility with value, noise with significance. The self knows differently. The self knows that true power is cultivated in hiddenness, in the sacred womb of the unconscious where no outer eyes can see, where no judgments can reach, where the divine work of transformation happens without applause. You see, the modern world, especially in American culture where you reside, has conditioned you to believe that if you are not speaking, you are not existing. If you are not posting, sharing, announcing, declaring, you are somehow irrelevant. This is a profound misunderstanding of how psychic energy actually works. Words are not neutral. They carry archetypal force. When you speak prematurely, before the self has given permission, you release energy that was meant to build pressure, to incubate possibility, to ripen potential. You puncture the container, and once punctured, the alchemical vessel cannot hold the transformation. Think of it this way. A woman who is pregnant does not announce every cellular change happening in her womb. She does not explain to strangers the exhaustion, the nausea, the mysterious movements she feels. She carries the secret in silence because she intuitively knows that life is being formed in a space too sacred for casual conversation. The same is true for you right now. You are pregnant with a new version of yourself. The self is forming something in the depths of your unconscious, a new attitude, a new relationship to life, a new integration of opposites. And your silence is the protection that allows this gestation to complete. But many of you have violated this natural law. You have been speaking about what is still forming. You have been explaining your journey to people who are not psychologically equipped to witness it. You have been defending your path to critics who will never understand because they are not called to walk it. And in doing so, you have invited what I called projections, the unconscious content of others that gets thrown onto you when they cannot face their own shadow material. They hear your truth, and it triggers their unexamined wounds, their repressed potential, their unlived lives. And suddenly, you are not just managing your own psyche, you are absorbing theirs. This is exhausting. This is why you feel drained after certain conversations. This is why peace evaporates when you try to explain yourself. The self never asked you to convince anyone. It never gave you permission to make your inner work a public spectacle. Those impulses came from the ego's need for validation, from the shadow's fear of being forgotten, from the wounded child within who was taught that love is earned through performance. The analytical mechanics, shadow and psyche. Let us go deeper now into the psychological mechanisms at play. Why does the divine command silence specifically for chosen ones? Because your psychic structure is different from the collective. You carry what I called archetypal sensitivity, a heightened receptivity to the unconscious, both personal and collective. This is both a gift and a burden. It means you perceive patterns others miss. You feel undercurrents others deny. You sense the mythic dimension underlying ordinary events. But it also means you are more vulnerable to psychic invasion, to energetic depletion, to what indigenous cultures call soul loss. When you speak carelessly, you create openings in your psychic field. Words are not just sounds, they are bridges between inner and outer worlds. Every time you verbalize something that is still gestating in the unconscious, you pull it prematurely into the conscious realm, where it must now contend with the ego's doubts, with society's judgments, with the collective's resistance to transformation. And because you are sensitive, you feel this resistance as physical tension. emotional heaviness, mental fog. Your body becomes the battlefield between what the self knows and what the world rejects. This is why the command for silence is so urgent right now. You are at a threshold. Jung described certain moments in the individuation journey as enantiodromia, the principle where things turn into their opposite. You have been moving towards something, building momentum, and now you are about to cross into a new psychic territory. But crossing requires a death of the old identity, and death processes are never public. They are solitary, they are dark, they are confusing. If you try to narrate them as they are happening, you will abort the process. Consider the archetype of the hermit, the figure who withdraws from the world not out of fear, but out of wisdom. The hermit understands that there are seasons for engagement and seasons for retreat. Right now, you are being called into the hermit's cave, into the introverted space where the self does its deepest work. But the ego resists. The ego wants to stay connected, to remain visible, to maintain relationships that are no longer serving your evolution. And so the self, in its wisdom, forces the issue. It removes certain people from your life. It dries up conversations. It creates circumstances that make silence inevitable. Some of you have been interpreting this as punishment or abandonment. You think you did something wrong, that the divine is displeased with you. But this is projection. You are projecting your father's disappointment, your mother's withholding, your culture's conditional love onto the self. The self does not punish, it redirects. It does not abandon, it conceals for protection. What you are experiencing is not rejection, it is initiation. In ancient mystery schools, initiates were required to observe periods of silence before receiving higher teachings. Why? Because silence creates the necessary psychic vacuum for new content to enter. If the mind is constantly producing words, constantly defending positions, constantly explaining itself, there is no room for the unconscious to speak. The self communicates through symbols, through dreams, through somatic sensations, all of which require a quiet inner space to be perceived. Your shadow, that part of the personality you have repressed, denied, or not yet integrated, also plays a crucial role here. Many of you have a shadow belief that says, if I am not speaking, I do not matter. This shadow conviction drives compulsive communication, the need to constantly prove your existence, your worth, your relevance. But the self is asking you to confront this shadow directly. You matter not because you speak, but because you are. Your existence is not validated by external acknowledgement, but by internal alignment with the archetypal self. There is also the shadow of spiritual pride, the inflation that comes from awakening experiences. Some of you receive profound insights, mystical visions, moments of unity consciousness, and the ego immediately wanted to share them, to be seen as special, to be recognized as awakened. But premature sharing deflates the experience, reduces it to mere words, and invites the shadow projections of envy, skepticism, and ridicule from those who are not ready to hear it. The self protects you from this by commanding silence. It preserves the numinous quality of your experiences by keeping them sacred, kept between you and the divine. The archetypal journey, the hero's path now. We must situate your experience within the larger mythic framework. You are not the first chosen one to walk this path of enforced silence. This is an archetypal pattern repeated throughout human history in myths, fairy tales, and sacred texts. Consider the story of the Fisher King, where the knight must remain silent in the presence of the Grail to receive healing. Or the tale of Psyche and Eros, where Psyche's sisters convince her to speak and question, which leads to the loss of her beloved. Or the biblical story of Zechariah, struck mute until the birth of John the Baptist. His silence was the incubation period for the coming revelation. What these myths teach us is that silence is not passive, it is powerfully active in the unconscious realm. When the hero stops speaking, stops striving, stops trying to make things happen through ego effort, the gods can finally act. The transcendent function, that reconciling force between consciousness and the unconscious, requires space to operate. Your silence creates that space. You are currently in what Joseph Campbell called the belly of the whale stage of the hero's journey. You have been swallowed by the unconscious. The old world has dissolved. You cannot go back to who you were, but you cannot yet see who you are becoming. This liminal space, this betwixt and between, is terrifying for the ego because it has no landmarks, no maps, no certainty. And so the ego wants to talk its way out, to create a narrative that makes sense, to announce a plan even when no plan exists. But the self says, no, stay in the darkness, let the transformation complete, trust what you cannot yet see. This is the test of the chosen one. Can you remain silent when everything in you wants to speak? Can you trust the invisible workings of the self when your life looks like chaos from the outside? Can you honor the sacred concealment even when it feels like burial? The archetype of the wounded healer is also active here. Many of you are healers, empaths, light workers, whatever term resonates with your consciousness. But you cannot heal others until you have first healed yourself, and healing happens in silence. The wounded healer must descend into their own underworld, must face their own demons, must integrate their own shadow before they can hold space for another's pain. Your silence right now is not selfish. It is necessary preparation for the work you will do later. You are being forged in the fires of introversion so that when you finally do speak, your words will carry weight, will carry healing, will carry the authority of someone who has walked through the valley and returned. There is also the archetype of the magician at work. The magician knows that words are spells, that speech creates reality, that to name something is to give it power. And so the magician is careful, strategic, intentional with language. The magician does not explain magic to those who will misuse it. The magician does not reveal secrets to those who are not initiated. Right now, the self is training you in the ways of the magician, teaching you that your voice is a sacred tool, not a casual instrument. You are learning discernment, timing, and the difference between speaking from ego and speaking from self. The alchemical transmutation, practical integration. So how do you live this? How do you embody the divine command for silence in the chaos of modern American life, where you are expected to be available, responsive, constantly communicating? First, you must make a conscious decision to honor the directive. This is not about being passive or avoidant. This is about aligning your will with the will of the self. Every morning, set an intention. Today, I will speak only what the self authorizes. I will resist the urge to explain, defend, or overshare. I will practice sacred silence. Second, create practical boundaries. You do not owe anyone immediate responses. You do not need to attend every conversation you are invited to. You can say no to coffee dates, phone calls, social gatherings that feel energetically depleting. This is not antisocial behavior. This is soul protection. The introverted phase of individuation requires physical and psychic solitude. Third, redirect your verbal energy into inner dialogue with the self. Instead of talking to people about what you are going through, talk to the divine within. Journal extensively, write letters to your unconscious, record voice memos for yourself. This keeps the psychic energy contained while still allowing expression. The difference is that you are not leaking energy to the outer world. You are cycling it back through your own psyche, which accelerates integration. Fourth, practice the art of strategic ambiguity when you must engage socially. You do not need to lie, but you also do not need to reveal everything. When someone asks what you are going through, you can simply say, "I'm in a season of deep reflection." That is true, and it does not invite invasive questions. Protect the mystery. Fifth, notice when the urge to speak comes from ego versus self. The ego speaks impulsively, reactively, defensively. The self speaks calmly, clearly, at the right moment. Before you say anything important, pause. Take 3 breaths. Ask internally, is this mine to say right now? If the answer is not a clear yes, stay silent. Sixth, use this time to build your inner authority. Read Jung, read mythology, read depth psychology. Fill the silence with wisdom rather than noise. The more you understand the archetypal patterns you are living, the less you will need external validation. You will begin to trust your own inner knowing. Seventh, honor the discomfort. Silence can feel awkward, especially in a culture that fears it. People will misinterpret your quiet. They will project onto you. Let them. You are not responsible for managing other people's projections. You are responsible for obeying the self. And finally, trust the timing of the transcendent function. The self knows when it is time to speak again. You will feel it, a fullness, a readiness, a clarity that was not there before. When that moment comes, your words will be powerful because they will come from integration, not fragmentation. They will carry the authority of someone who has been tempered in the fires of sacred silence. This is not forever. This is a season, but it is a crucial season, and how you navigate it will determine the depth of your next emergence. The divine is not silencing you to diminish you. It is silencing you to prepare you for a voice that will shake the foundations of your life and the lives of those you are meant to touch. So, chosen one, shut your mouth and listen, because what the self is about to reveal in the silence will change everything. Chapter 2. The Shadow Work and Resistance. Here is where we enter the uncomfortable territory that most spiritual teachings avoid. We must speak plainly about why you are resisting the divine command for silence, because resistance is never random. It is always revealing. Your resistance is a map to your shadow, to the unconscious material you have not yet integrated, to the wounds you have not yet healed. And if we do not address this resistance directly, with psychological precision, you will continue sabotaging the very thing your soul is crying out for. Let me ask you something. Why does silence feel like death to you? Why does the thought of not speaking, not explaining, not defending yourself trigger such profound anxiety in your nervous system? This is not a rhetorical question. This is the question that will unlock everything, because the answer is buried in your personal unconscious, in the complex of experiences, beliefs, and traumas that shaped your relationship with voice, with visibility, with mattering. For many of you, silence was weaponized in childhood. Perhaps you grew up in a household where the silent treatment was punishment, where love was withdrawn when you displeased the parental figures, where being ignored meant you were bad, wrong, unworthy. And so your psyche developed a survival pattern. Speak to be seen, explain to be safe, defend to exist. This is not conscious. It is a program running in the background of your nervous system. And now, when the self asks you to be silent, that old wound activates. Your inner child panics. If I stop talking, I will disappear. If I stop defending myself, I will be erased. This is shadow material. This is the repressed terror that if you are not constantly proving your worth through words, through performance, through visibility, you will be abandoned. But here is the psychological truth you must confront, that fear is not reality. It is projection. You are projecting your childhood experience of conditional love onto the divine. You are confusing the self's command for silence with your parents' emotional withdrawal. These are not the same. The self is not punishing you, it is protecting you. But your wounded ego cannot yet distinguish between the two. There is also the shadow of people-pleasing, which is a trauma response disguised as kindness. Many of you speak, explain, and overshare because you are trying to prevent rejection, conflict, or disapproval. You think if you can just make people understand, if you can just articulate your intentions clearly enough, they will accept you. But this is exhausting, and it is futile, because the people who need endless explanations are the people who are not meant to understand you. They are living in a different archetypal reality, operating from a different level of consciousness. And no amount of words will bridge that gap. The self is asking you to stop trying to be understood by everyone. This is a radical act of self-love, and your shadow hates it. Your shadow would rather be exhausted and accepted than rested and misunderstood. But individuation requires that you choose your own wholeness over the comfort of the collective's approval. This is the death that silence demands, the death of the people-pleasing persona. Now let us address the shadow of spiritual bypassing. Some of you will read this message and think, yes, I will be silent, but you will be using silence as a way to avoid necessary confrontation, healthy anger, or setting boundaries. This is not the silence the self is commanding. The self is not asking you to become passive, to tolerate abuse, to spiritually justify being a doormat. That is the shadow distorting the message. Holy silence is powerful, not powerless. Holy silence knows when to speak truth firmly and when to withhold speech strategically. If your silence makes you feel smaller, weaker, more afraid, that is not the self. That is unprocessed shadow material masquerading as obedience. Let me be clinically precise. The shadow that prevents you from embracing sacred silence is often rooted in what I called complexes, emotional clusters in the unconscious that have a life of their own. You may have the abandonment complex, triggered every time someone stops responding to you. You may have an inferiority complex, convinced that if you are not constantly contributing to conversations, you have no value. You may have a savior complex, believing it is your job to heal, fix, or enlighten everyone around you through your words. These complexes are autonomous. They hijack your consciousness. When they are activated, you are no longer operating from the self. You are operating from a fragmented part of your psyche that is still trying to solve a childhood wound. And the tragedy is that these complexes drain your energy, distort your perception, and prevent you from accessing the wisdom of the self. This is why the divine command for silence is so critical. It interrupts the compulsive patterns driven by these complexes. Silence forces the complexes to surface so they can finally be seen, acknowledged, and integrated. But integration is painful. It requires you to feel what you have been avoiding. It requires you to sit with the discomfort of not rescuing yourself through speech. Many of you use words as a defense mechanism, as a way to intellectualize emotion, to create distance from the raw vulnerability of simply being. You talk because you do not want to feel. You explain because you do not want to grieve. You defend because you do not want to admit how deeply you have been hurt. The self is saying, stop running, sit in the silence, let the feelings come, let the tears fall, let the rage surface. This is not collapse. This is catharsis. This is the alchemical process of solutio, where the rigid structures of the ego dissolve so that something more authentic can emerge. You cannot skip this stage. If you try to bypass it with more talking, more explaining, more spiritual posturing, you will remain stuck in the same psychological patterns for years. The ego's fear of irrelevance. Here is a truth that will sting. Part of your resistance to silence is the ego's terror of becoming irrelevant. You have built an identity around being the one who speaks, who advises, who shares wisdom, who is available. And now the self is asking you to step back, to let go of that role, to allow others to move forward without your input. This feels like death because, in a sense, it is death. The death of the inflated ego that confused being helpful with being necessary. You are not as needed as you think you are. This is not to diminish your gifts. It is to liberate you from the exhausting burden of believing that the world cannot function without your constant participation. The self is teaching you that your worth is not determined by how much you contribute to the collective. Your worth is inherent, given by the imago Dei within you, not earned through performance. But the ego hates this message. The ego wants to be special, to be recognized, to be indispensable. And so when the self commands silence, the ego protests, "But what if they forget about me? What if someone else takes my place? What if I lose my platform, my influence, my relevance?" These are the ego's fears, not the self's concerns. The self does not compete. The self does not cling. The self rests in its own being, knowing that what is truly yours cannot be taken by another. This is where the shadow of envy also emerges. Some of you are secretly afraid that while you are silent, someone else will rise, will speak, will receive the attention you think you deserve. This is the wound of comparison, the belief that there is a finite amount of recognition available and you must fight for your share. But this is collective shadow thinking. The self operates from abundance, not scarcity. When you are aligned with the self, you understand that your silence is not a loss of opportunity. It is the creation of space for the right opportunities to find you. The individuation process will strip you of every false identity, every inflated role, every persona you constructed to survive. And this is excruciating for the ego. The ego will throw tantrums, will create emergencies, will manufacture reasons why you must speak, why you cannot stay quiet, why now is not the time. But the self is unmoved. The self knows that until the ego surrenders its need to be seen, heard, and validated by the outer world, you cannot access the deeper dimensions of your being. The guilt complex, around receiving, there is another layer of shadow material that must be addressed. The guilt you feel around receiving abundance, prosperity, love, or success without doing something to earn it. This is particularly strong in American culture, where the Protestant work ethic has created a collective complex that equates worthiness with productivity. You have internalized the belief that if you are not constantly striving, explaining, proving, you do not deserve what you receive. And so when the self commands silence, which is essentially commanding rest, receptivity, feminine energy, your shadow screams, "I should be doing more, I should be working harder. If I stop, everything will fall apart." This is not truth. This is trauma. This is the internalized voice of a culture that does not understand the cyclical nature of creation, that does not honor the fallow seasons, that does not trust the invisible workings of the unconscious. The divine is trying to teach you how to receive. But you cannot receive when your hands are always full, when your mouth is always moving, when your energy is constantly leaking outward. Silence creates the psychic space for reception. It opens the inner vessel. It signals to the unconscious that you are ready to be filled, not from your own effort, but from the abundance of the self. But your shadow resists this because deep down, you do not believe you are worthy of receiving without earning.